Hello, and welcome to Lexington Remembers, capturing the memories of Lexington, Massachusetts. This video history project began in 2005 with Mary Gillespie, Dan Fenn, Jackie Ward, Julie Miller, and Bob and Francine Edwards. Prior programs in the series can be found on YouTube under the title Lexington Remembers. Today is December 11th, 2025, and I am Sue Rockwell, along with Donna Hooper. We are members of the current committee. Our guest today is Bill Poole, technically Dr. William Poole, and we will explain that in a few moments. Although he's never lived in Lexington, he is a very important part of Lexington's history, as we will learn today. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
So as we begin, could you talk about your background a little bit, your education and your professional work?
Yeah, so my background in history, I have a Master's of Arts in History from what is now the University of New Orleans, and then a doctorate in history from the University of Chicago. I also have a degree in chemistry and biochemistry, but we'll talk about history today.
Okay, concentrate on the history. And your work, your professional work?
Yes, I taught history for a number of years in the Chicago area, and then went into textbook publishing and became senior acquisitions editor for Scott Forsman. And then that brought me here to Addison Wesley in Reading. So that's how I got back to New England.
Uh-huh. Now, I mentioned that you're not a Lexington resident, so how did your connection begin?
I've always had a connection to Lexington. I guess it was starting with my grandmother, who took me out on an adventure on each Saturday. And we came to Lexington, believe it or not, on the streetcar.
Uh-huh.
And I saw Captain Parker, actually the Minuteman statue, and was so impressed looking up. Then we went up to the hand clock house, and I believe that's where I got my first cocked hat.
Ah.
So I've always had that connection. And also, we had an old 78 RPM record of Paul Revere's Ride,
Really?
which I used to listen to all the time.
The poem?
The poem, yes.
But you got over that, all of the inaccuracies in that. You later learned, right?
Yes. Actually, what brought me back to Lexington was the memory of that, but then I got interested in the reenactment. And I came to the first several reenactments in the 1990s when we had come back from Chicago. And I brought my wife and son for a couple of them, but they dropped out pretty quickly. Getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning wasn't their forte. So I started coming in all by myself. Uh-huh. And after one reenactment, I spoke to one individual who was a reenactor, and I said, "How do you do this?" And he told me, "We just come to the Lexington Minute Men meeting, the third Thursday of every month," and he told me where to go, and so I did. And I joined the Lexington Minute Men and started taking part in the reenactments. And I was there for the 225th reenactment, which was amazing, to watch 700 British soldiers march across Lexington Common. It felt much like what they must have felt in those days.
That was in 2000, right?
Yes, right, yeah.
There was a camp out and all kinds of activity that year.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. It was really great, yeah. It was the best introduction to reenacting, which I took up then afterwards, and engaged in many, many reenactments, going from Canada all the way down to Virginia.
Mm-hmm. And then you actually got involved with the Paul Revere's Ride reenactment.
Yes,
right?
I did. That was a little bit later, but I took the part of Sergeant Monroe and played that for several years. I don't know, 10 years, Sue? You were...
I think at least 10 years,
at least 10
yes.
years, yeah. And that was wonderful. That's a great production, a lot of fun, and I enjoyed that part tremendously. So I got really involved in Lexington, eventually joined the Lexington Historical Society. was clerk for a number of years, and I actually was president. I was captain commanding of the Lexington Minute Men, so I've had these real strong connections to Lexington.
Right. And at some point you discovered you had a connection with one of the men on the green, right?
Yes, that's interesting and odd, actually. I had, like everyone else, I didn't start talking about or thinking about my family until a lot of the individuals who could have helped me out had passed on. So I had to do it all on my own. And my grandmother was a Locke, and my great-grandmother had married a Locke. And I started from there working backwards in the Locke family and wound up with Ebenezer Locke, who was born about 1732. And I traced him up to Deering, New Hampshire, a small town west of Manchester. And I was in the New Hampshire State Library reading the history of Deering. And I came to this sentence that said, early settler Ebenezer Locke fired first shot of the American Revolution, April 19, 1775 in Lexington. And I said, wait a minute, we don't know who fired the first shot. What is this all about? It turned out that actually Ebenezer was there. He was not right on the common. What had happened was, according to the testimony of his first cousin Amos, they had heard the bell ringing, and they were worried that the British were coming to capture John Hancock and Samuel Adams, who were staying at the parsonage then. So they grabbed their muskets and came down into the town where they found the militia gathering. And they stayed there for a long, long time, and finally someone came in and said, I've been all the way to Boston, and there's not a redcoat on the way. At which point Captain Parker dismissed the men and said those who live nearby can go home, and the others stay in nearby homes or in Buckman Tavern. Amos and Ebenezer hung around for a while longer, and finally they decided to walk back home. They lived on the border of Lexington and Woburn. Ebenezer actually lived in Woburn, and Amos lived in Lexington, but they were within a couple of miles of each other.
How were they related?
First cousins. So Amos said we had not got very far, and we heard a firing. And we dashed back, and we found Asa Hell Porter from Woburn shot through the body out behind a wall behind Buckman Tavern, at which point Ebenezer leveled his musket and fired at the regulars. So he was one of the ones that fired at the regulars. Now, was he the first? We will discuss that probably forever.
Yes.
But he certainly was one. And in Woburn, because he was a Woburnite, they claimed for a long time that they thought he was the one that fired the first shot. Now, he may have thought he fired the first shot as well, brought that story up to Deering, and therefore Deering claimed him. He was very famous up there. They had every Patriots Day they would march out to his grave site, hold a celebration and mark his grave. And that carried on upwards through World War I.
We actually have a couple of images. I think there was an article in the Boston Globe when you discovered your connection.
Yes,
right?
as you can tell, I made what a friend of mine said. I was the only person he knew who made the first page above the fold that hadn't committed a crime.
Look at that.
So yeah,
Congratulations.
they interviewed me because they were talking about who fired the first shot and so
Right.
forth. So that's what this is about. And I was in charge of the Lexington Militia at that time.
Great. And you were saying he was quite a, excuse the expression, big shot in New Hampshire. In fact, didn't they have a coin or something for him?
Yes, they did. For the bicentennial, that would have been 1975, they had a coin. And this was the front part of the medal. And then on the obverse of the medal, it has the statement, if we could show that. It shows an individual at the plow, and it says Ebenezer Locke fired first shot of the American Revolution. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, he was well known up there. And in fact, there was on the, I guess it's Channel 9, I believe, is the New Hampshire station. Fitz Weatherby did a program standing beside Ebenezer's grave and so forth and talking about that first shot.
And I think you said they have some kind of a ceremony every year at his gravesite?
They did for quite some time. I don't think they're doing it now. There is a graveyard up there. It's called the Goodale Cemetery. And this is the line of Locke graves. And Ebenezer's, the grave is the one with the flag there. And they mark that every year with the flag.
Oh, very nice.
Those are all Locke
Those
graves?
are all Locke's. Two of his sons are there. Ebenezer is my 6th great-grandfather, and my 5th great-grandfather, Benjamin, is also buried there.
It's interesting to see a lot of the Minutemen or the militia that served at that time, they all since moved north or west.
That's true. A lot moved up into New Hampshire and also some up into Vermont and a few out to New York as well. And they moved out there sometime after the Revolutionary War. Ebenezer fought in the Revolutionary War, as did all 3 of his sons, who joined the Army at either age 15 or 16. And Ebenezer had some great adventures in the Army. He was in at the Siege of Boston, served from April 19th, 1775 through December 31st, and then he volunteered to serve for another month, January of 1776, because that's when Washington reorganized the Army so you actually had a continental army, not just state troops. And at that time, Ebenezer signed up for a year. So he would have been serving through December of 1776. He took part in the Battle of Trenton. And then if you watched Ken Burns' Revolutionary series, there is a scene where Washington appears before the troops and he's asking them if they'll sign up for just one more month. This was following Trenton and before the Battle of Princeton. And he rode before them and he thanked them for their service and asked if they would sign up. And not a person stepped forward. And he was astonished. He rode back again in a very emotional tone, said that they would serve the cause of America and the country, and asked them again. And there was dead silence. And then a couple of men stepped forward, and a few more, and then 1,000 actually stepped forward.
Wow.
And Ebenezer was among them, along with his young son Ebenezer, who was serving with him. So it's a great story. Then Ebenezer's regiment led when they slipped around Cornwallis and went on to Princeton, their regiment led the way to the Battle of Princeton.
That's great.
Yeah.
Terrific. And presumably they both came home in one piece?
They both came home in April. They served in April of 76. They came home, and then Ebenezer Jr. joined up for 3 years. And he served that 3 years, and about a few weeks before he was to be discharged, he was shot in the hip. He received a musket ball in the hip. And he eventually, the wound never healed. And he died at age 36 from that wound.
Oh, dear.
And then my 5th great-grandfather, Benjamin, the son of Ebenezer, joined at age 16, and he served for a year.
Wow. Quite a family.
Yeah, it's quite a family, yeah. And none of this did I know.
Right.
Here I was serving in the Minutemen,
Right.
knowing all about the battle and so forth, and how no one knew who fired the first shot.
Any of
and
your
so forth.
relatives particularly interested after you found out all this?
Oh
or
yeah,
they just
all my cousins and such are interested now. I wrote I guess you'd call it a genealogy. It's about 1,000 pages. I went back and got every family that I could find all the way back to the 15th century.
Wow.
And they were just loved it, and so they've been reading it ever since.
So your research eventually went beyond Ebenezer, and for many years we've been saying there were 77 Minutemen on the green that day, but you've discovered there were more.
Yeah, Frank Warren Coburn was the one who came up with that number. He wrote it in his little book about Lexington, but he also published it in the Boston Globe, and he said, I know exactly how many there were, 77. And what he had done, he'd gone back to the depositions that were given in 1775 and 1824 and 25, and he just wrote down everyone who gave a deposition.
Okay.
And there were 77. Some were multiple depositions where 16 would sign one and so forth. And he said, that's it. So when I started my research, I read all the depositions, and I found out that there were people mentioned in there who did not write a deposition, but had taken part. So they should have been included as well. It turned out that we found 6 individuals who should have been mentioned and placed on the monument by Buckman Tavern. And interestingly, there are 2 duplications on the monument. Because of the nature of what they did, they put all the officers out at the top. And it turns out that 2 of them gave a deposition under one name in 1775, and in another name in 1824-25. And so they're on their duplicate. So there are actually 81 people there on the monument who took part, were either on the Common or around the Common on the 19th of April.
Wow.
How accurate do you think that is?
I think it's pretty darn accurate.
Yeah.
Well, he did it, so of
That's
course.
right.
Yeah, of course it's accurate. Yeah, I also got interested in, after I wrote the biography of Ebenezer, I got started in trying to make sure that the biographies of all those 81 individuals were done and that they were posted on the website. They deserve that. So it turns out that because some people were busy, some people were working and didn't have time, others weren't that interested in doing it. I just started writing them and wound up writing 66 of them. So when you go on the website, you'll see a lot of those I wrote. That's about 80% of those that are up there.
And the website is the Lexington
The
Minute?
website is the Lexington Minute Men, yeah, and you go to a pull-down menu which says About, and it has Captain Parker's company, and it has all the biographies there.
That's great.
Yeah, it was great fun.
LexingtonMinutemen.com, right?
Yes.
LexingtonMinutemen.com.
Yeah, exactly, right, yeah, LexingtonMinutemen.com. And not the newspaper.
Oh, right. There's a lot of Minutemen.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Now, you also, in addition to your work specifically for the Minutemen, you also worked with the National Park Service. I think to remind people, there's a place called Parker's Revenge.
Yes.
And you might set that up a little bit as to what that means.
Yes.
And then talk about what they've been doing out there.
Sure, yeah. Parker's Revenge is the site where the men from Lexington met the regulars on their way back from Concord. Now, you have to remember that with 10 individuals killed, 8 on the Common, and 9 wounded there as well, Lexington suffered tremendously. Everyone in town was a relative, a family member, a friend, a neighbor to all of those. It was a tremendous tragedy for a town of only 700 individuals. And yet somehow Captain Parker, perhaps with the aid of Reverend Hancock, got the men together and they set off in pursuit of the British after they had buried their comrades and hidden their graves.
Excuse me, I think you meant Reverend Clark.
Reverend
right?
Clark,
Yeah.
excuse me, yes. And that's probably what has been described as their greatest moment of courage, is when, after what they had seen, one of them, in fact, was wounded, and despite his wound,
went with them?
Went with them, yes,
Wow.
right, yeah. So they went out to a site on the border of Lexington, and we were never sure where exactly it was. There's a rocky outcrop up there that looks like a romantic image of where they were standing, firing down at the regulars and so forth. And so it was decided that they would hold an archaeological investigation. Starting in 2012, it was a 4-year project, beginning with clearing the site for the use of electronic surveying equipment and so forth. We did a ground penetrating radar, and we located the musket balls that were fired on that day. I don't know if you can imagine what it was like to stand there holding a musket ball in your hand that was fired on the 19th of April, 1775.
Yeah.
So we spent the 4 years on that project. After cleaning up and doing all the surveying and so forth, we had to do an analysis and say, well, what do the finds mean? We have these artifacts and so forth. We have the musket balls. Where were they located and what did that signify? What we found was that you can identify British musket balls because they're all regular. They're all the same caliber because they're fired from the standard Brown Bess musket. And what we found, there was a line of them like this, all in a row. But the militia musket balls were all fired down here in a grouping. So you could tell that up here was where the militia was, and the British were firing at them. And here were the regulars down here, were the militia firing at them. So we could define the battlefield and accurately point out right exactly where everyone stood. Not by name or by individual, but we found out how the militiamen fired at them, not too many shots, maybe one, possibly two, and then they started taking casualties. One man was killed, 2 men were killed actually, and one man, Francis Brown, was shot through the cheek. And he used to display that wound.
Oh.
So there were two
militiamen
militiamen killed, one injured.
Who
what
were
about
killed,
the regulars? Any?
We don't know. It's uncertain. We think there were casualties there, but we really don't know. We didn't get any musket balls that were bloody or anything like that, or had any DNA on them.
So this map shows what,
this shows
what the
where it
results
is
were?
on the trail, and you can see where it says Parker up there. It's a very evocative site because, as I said, there's this rocky outcrop and then a hillside, wood-covered, sloping down towards a brook. And the British would have had to cross that brook on a narrow bridge. They would have been confined. And if they spotted the militia up here, they would have sent a squad across to confront them. And this is where we think the firing took place. And then they would have marched on down to the bluff and on to Fisk Hill, where all along here there were militiamen firing. We think that there may have been upwards of 3,000 militiamen who took part on that afternoon from all the towns locally, up as far as Chelmsford and so forth. So Parker, after Parker's revenge, the next huge engagement is at Fisk Hill. And that's where the famous story about the individual who was shot, and we still have his powder horn. It's in the Concord Museum that he was shot, and the bullet went through the powder, and he was killed.
You mentioned that all these 3,000 militia had arrived. Now, Paul Revere didn't warn all of them, right?
No, poor Paul Revere didn't quite make it. Unlike the poem, he didn't ride into Concord. What happened is that the British had sent out groups of officers and sergeants to station themselves at every crossroad and so forth to stop the alarm from getting out. They were to stop anyone who was riding and so forth. Paul Revere had encountered a group of those on his way out here and was forced off of his route and had to take another way to reach Lexington. And then when he and William Dawes rode off, along with young Dr. Prescott, they were stopped by one of these groups of officers and sergeants. And I don't think you receive the
capture site?
Capture site. It's
I
further
don't think it's on that part of the map.
But they
no.
were stopped by these officers and sergeants, and they seized Paul Revere's bridle. Now, William Dawes managed to break away and gallop away. He was unhorsed, fell off his horse. Prescott, who was from Concord, managed to really get away and go on then to be the one that won Concord. And Paul Revere was held captive for a while and eventually was let go when he claimed that there were going to be 500 militiamen in Lexington waiting for them. And at that time, they heard musket firing in Lexington when the Lexington militiamen discharged their muskets in order to go into Buckman's Tavern. And that, the patrol just let them go, cut their bridles, took their horses, and rode off. And Revere then had to walk back through the swamps to get back to the parsonage.
But there would have been other riders at that point.
We think
after what happened on the green
Yep.
in the morning, there would have been other riders that went out.
Well, the other riders had already gone out probably before Revere actually crossed the river and went to Charlestown, because this had been well planned. At the time that Revere had started off, the alarm was across the Merrimack River. Someone fired a shot to alert those over across the Merrimack River that
So
the
it really
alarm
spread
was out.
quickly. The
Yeah,
alarm
it was
spread
very,
really
very quickly. Yeah.
quite a distance.
Yeah, because the rider would go and then they would use bonfires or musket shots usually to alert another rider, and they just, it was sort of like a chain of riders who went. And there were well over 20 who rode that night.
Bill, you had mentioned before about this research for this area here, and that working with the National Park Service, the system that was developed for this is now somewhat being used.
What we did there was so well done, and I don't claim anything for that, but our archaeologist, Meg Waters, who led that, we did such a great job, it became sort of a guide for other national parks and working with volunteers. The national parks were very suspicious of volunteers. Our park is great about that. It's not. Minuteman is really great about working with volunteers. But they always worried about having professional people working with volunteers. But we did such a great job, and it's written up in a volume about that thick with illustrations and so forth, that it actually became the guide for volunteers working in national parks throughout the country.
So it's like the Parker's
It's the Parker's Revenge project.
process.
Lives on, right.
Yeah, no.
Well, that's great.
Is there any other research going on that you know of, or is there any
Yes.
that you would like to see?
Well, there's a lot of research has been done that I wasn't able to take part in, but they've done an awful lot of research out by Concord Bridge, where they found where the militiamen stood and loaded their muskets and changed their flints and so forth. Along Battle Road, particularly around Concord Bridge right there, and then further in, they found musket balls and can determine approximately, how many people were there and where the firing took place and so forth. It's an ongoing project. I think that eventually they may do the whole park. The bluff is right here. Now, after Parker's Revenge and all the firing and wounding and so forth, they sheltered at the bluff there and waited a while until they caught their breath and so forth, and then marched
Is that the
on
main
to,
granite, the big granite?
Yeah, it's a big granite outcrop there, right, yeah. And then they marched on to Fisk Hill, where they had another disastrous encounter. And it's said that by the time they reached the border of Lexington, they'd run out of water, ammunition was failing. The officers were having to beat the men back into ranks. And one officer said they were on the point of surrendering. When they reached Lexington Hill and looked down out over the village and on the hill beyond by Monroe Tavern and so forth, was 1,000 more regulars
Wow.
under Earl Percy, who'd come to the relief of Colonel Smith and his force.
Yeah. Is there more research that you would like to see be done? I mean, maybe among the minority groups that were involved?
See, I
or
believe
anything?
history is inclusive, and it should include everyone. And we have tended to be more or less exclusive. But after World War II, we began to be more inclusive and look for the involvement of blacks, other minorities, and particularly women. I think that's one area, is the involvement of women and how they really helped win the Revolutionary War, both serving with the men and helping with the men, and acting as nurses, and then taking care of things at home, running the farms, running the businesses, and so forth. They are an invaluable source of labor for during the Revolutionary War, much as we saw during World War II with Rosie the Riveter and so forth, where the women took the place of men so that they could go off to war.
Can you speak to any experiences during this whole research and your involvement in the Minutemen and beyond that really has, what impact that has served on you, you personally?
I think that going through the reenactment, you get a feeling for being there. Walking across the common and catching the sight of my cocked hat and musket and knowing that my ancestor was there was a very emotional experience. And when you're standing in line there and the British level their bayonets at you, you feel it right here. And so it is a reenactment, and it is a theater, if you wish to call it, but it's historical reenactment. And it gives you a feeling for what happened. I have one story that I might tell about the Battle of Princeton, in which my ancestor took place. We did a reenactment there. And they woke us and got us up in the morning, and they brought us to a field, a very, very large field. And there were several hundred of us in a line standing in that field. We didn't have an idea of what the topography was and so forth. But apparently the field rose up like that and then dropped into a shallow valley and then rose up again. And on the other side were all the spectators watching. And then pushing the British back up this was another group of the Continental Army. And that rider rode up and he said, "Forward, men." And so we marched up. And you couldn't see anything, so at the tips of our bayonets, and all of a sudden, several hundred men rose up out of the ground.
Oh.
Wow.
There was a gasp that went through the spectators. And I had a friend of mine who was acting as an interpreter, but his back was to us, and he sees this crowd going, and he turned around and he said, "Holy," little word there afterwards. He'd never seen anything like that. It was Hollywood. It was a Cecil B. DeMille production. There were things like that we went through that were marvelous experience.
So it isn't only reenactments on the green. You've gone to other
Yeah,
sites as well.
we've reenacted in Canada and in Montreal and all the way down to Virginia. We've done battles all along the way. We did Trenton and Princeton, as I said. We did Yorktown, and that was a wonderful event. However, I did French. I also joined a French unit, and so at Yorktown I was French. And there's a wonderful story about after the surrender. I'm not sure if it's apocryphal or not, but the French stood on one side and the Continentals on the other. And the British marched through, and they were told, don't look at those Continentals. So they stared only at us as they went by. And the story is that Lafayette felt that the Americans were being insulted. And he gathered all the fifes and drums together, and they crashed out Yankee Doodle, at which point the British looked like that. I don't know if that's apocryphal, but it's a great story. I hope it happened.
Such great memories.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Really,
wonderful,
good
wonderful memories.
experiences.
Yeah.
Right.
So, in addition to, or maybe as a perk to your being in the Minutemen, you got to be in the Patriots End Zone Militia.
I did.
Now, first explain what that is.
The End Zone Militia is made up of members from various reenactments groups, and you're invited to join. And I was invited to join them. And they take part, they fire their muskets when there is a score, whenever the Patriots score, for touchdowns and extra points. So I did that for, I don't know how many years, 10 years or something like that. It was fantastic. We would go in 3 hours before the game started, and an hour before the gates opened, and position ourselves. And then people would come by and they wanted to have their pictures taken with us. So our pictures are all over the country, because we'd invite people from who were visiting teams, and they'd say, you want us to take a picture? Come on, take a picture. So it's a great experience.
They continue that today, don't they?
They still continue
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
today, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Occasionally you can hear the pop, pop, pop after the touchdown.
Yeah.
So joining the Minutemen was one of the greatest things, and it brought me so close to Lexington, which I
Now, are you
still
retired Minuteman now, or what's?
I still am there, but I don't go to the meetings as much. They do Zoom meetings, and I do that. I'm not so great driving at night now, so I'll go whenever the meetings are held when it's light out.
Do you go for April 19th?
I go for it, definitely go for April 19th if I had to walk in.
Yeah.
But I don't fight in the reenactment
Right.
anymore. I'm
Yeah.
just not physically able to do that, nor to do the End Zone Militia anymore. Sadly, you get old.
Well, there's a lot of other opportunities
Yeah.
that keep you busy anyway. So
No,
that's
so I've been
great.
doing writing mostly, and writing short stories and stuff for the Historical Society.
Are you researching any individuals right now?
I am not. What I'm assisting with is that recently women have become members of the Minutemen, which is a great thing. We've wanted that to happen for quite some time. And they're starting to write their biographies, which I think is just terrific. As I spoke of before, that women need to, the story of the women needs to be told, their part in history.
Weren't you a contributor to the most recent publication by the Historical Society?
Yes, I wrote a number of stories that went in that. That's a small volume that has some very, very interesting stories about. It gives you a great background for visiting Lexington, and almost what you should see in Lexington, and then the background stories behind them. Well, the name of that book that they have at Buckman Tavern is Revolutionary Stories. Wonderful little tales about Lexington, and gives a great introduction to what you should see in Lexington and the background.
Anything else that we haven't asked you about that you'd like to let people know about the Minuteman Company or any other activities?
Well, the Minutemen don't just do the reenactment. They represent the town, and we hope that they represent the town well. They march in parades and they take part in ceremonies like a high school graduation and so forth. They march in parades in other towns all throughout the eastern portion of Massachusetts and down towards Plymouth and such. And it gives both the Minutemen and Lexington some advertisement, I guess you'd say.
So you said they're accepting women into the Minutemen now too.
Yes.
And they seem to be welcoming new members.
Oh, yeah,
They're
we
always-
love new members, yeah. And we've been doing very well about bringing in new members in the last few years. I think because we've really made an overt attempt to do that. We've always wanted them and tried to spread the word, but now there's an ad in a newspaper sometimes, or we spread the word around. And women have wanted to join for a while, but we weren't quite figured out. Since each of us represents a specific individual and takes that individual's name, and we take part in the common, we're trying to figure out what roles women would play. And then in talking to the women, we found out that they had some really good ideas of what they should do. And so they're taking part now. And during the reenactment, or before the reenactment, they show the panic that ensued here in these towns when they found out that the regulars were coming, as the word was spread by these riders. They fled their homes, particularly those here along Battle Road and where the regulars were marching. But interestingly enough, the panic spread. Up in Ware, New Hampshire, where another place where my relatives live, a rider rode in the day following to tell them that the regulars were coming. Now, he never told them what happened or the result of the battle. So they were afraid that the regulars were riding up the river to Ware, New Hampshire. It's a little small river. And they fled, people fled to the woods. And there's a story about the woman who'd cooked some fudge and didn't know what to do with it then. And then she and the family gorged themselves on the fudge so that it wouldn't get to the regulars. Now, this is Ware, way up in New Hampshire. So, so you can imagine what it was like. People here, how panicked they were.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, in fact, as part of the reenactment on April 19th, they've recently added a section showing the women and children.
Exactly, how the women and elderly had to flee their homes. And it was warranted because we know on the way back, the British went into homes, ransacked homes, set some in fire here in Lexington. So it was well that they did flee their homes. Because at one point they took a woman out on her bed or something like that and then burnt the house down. So there were lots of stories. We don't know how many are actually true. But we do know that from Lexington on, they shot every man that they could get a hold of, whether they were in arms or not. There were some who were sitting in a tavern celebrating an engagement, and they just went in and shot them. So it was well worth it that people fled their homes.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Haven't we?
Yeah, and it set me off, as I say, on a genealogical journey that led me to France, led me to Ireland, led me to
really?
England. I've traced my French ancestors back to the 15th century. In France, I traced my Irish ancestors back and met my cousins there in Ireland and so forth. So it's been a wonderful adventure for me, and I still go back and do a little bit on that every once in a while.
It's really opened up things for you.
Yeah, it
Stop and
has.
think about how it really has
Right.
influenced your
Yeah,
life.
and I would advise that everyone that now is the time to start your genealogies. Now is the time to write your family history before your mother and dad aren't there to pass them on, or your grandparents and so forth. We're fortunate now that we have so many grandparents.
Right.
In my time, there weren't that. Both my maternal grandparents died, and only my maternal grandmother, great-grandmother was left, I should say. And now we have so many great-grandparents around. And those are the people you need to talk to. Get your bibliography.
The first-hand stories,
first-hand
in addition
stories,
to
yeah.
all of the technology that exists today.
And you'd be amazed what's up in the attics.
Yeah, that's true,
That
too.
too. Well, wonderful.
This has been great, Bill. Thank
Yes.
you so
Thank you.
much.
It's been
Thank
nice
you.
chatting with
Thank you
yeah.
to our honorary Lexingtonian.
Thank you, yes. I'd like to have that. Honorary Lexingtonian.
Yeah, there must be a way we can do that. Anyway, thank you so much, and
welcome.
thank you all for joining us today on Lexington Remembers.
Thank you.